Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin. We are on the cusp of Labor Day weekend, Familia. It is the busiest fantasy football drafts weekend of the year. 60% of drafts are happening this weekend on Yahoo. So, Familia, I thought we'd bring on one of Yahoo's finest, amigo Andy Behrens. Just I'm so happy to have you. Also, just first off, before I give him the big intro, make sure you're following Familia FFB on YouTube. Okay, give us a like and subscribe. Where our numbers just keep growing. So let's keep doing this. And but yeah, Andy, uh, I'm so happy that you joined us here today. I mean, this is just nothing short of just, gosh. I mean, uh, I've been listening to your stuff for quite a while, which is, and I've loved. I didn't want to say many years. No, I've listened to your stuff. I love that you go baseball and football, and gosh, staying true to Chicago. I mean, gosh, and we got to spend a few minutes. We got to spend a little while together chatting at the Fantasy Football Expo. And we bonded over our shared love for National League only fantasy
Yeah.
baseball. So, and also I'm Raul Abanez All Stars. Yeah, that is, I can't tell you how many times I use that. So he may be the originator of the Raul Abanez All Stars, but he is very timeless. So bienvenido, Andy Behrens, mi amigo. Welcome.
I gotta like credit where it's due. Scott Pianowski is the originator of the Ibanez All Stars. It's an incredible, absolutely incredible moniker. That's his fine work. It was awesome hanging in Canton with you. Been great to have you as part of the Yahoo squad this year too. So happy to be here. Excited to be here. I'm like, man, like week one is like. It's right here. And I was just looking, I just went through and I did my week one ranks, and like the games are good. The games are really good. The Thursday night game is awesome. It's the Lions and Chiefs. That should be 70 points. That's awesome. We get Bears Packers, we get Giants Cowboys, we've got Bills Jets. Like it is a fun slate.
Fantasy good. It's gonna be fantasy goodness all around. I mean, hopefully it's big points. Hopefully there's no rain. I know last year Chicago got a monsoon on
Yeah.
opening weekend, but yeah. I mean, I'm just it that Thursday night game. Just if the Lions can show up, and I know the Chiefs sometimes are a little lax when it comes to defense at the beginning of the season, but yeah, if the Lions could just show up, that would just be so much fun, so much fun. But yeah, you know what? With so many drafts happening this weekend, I mean, I thought it'd be great, and love that you're joining us. Um, I was listening this morning to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show, the final cram session, and so I'm kind of calling this the 2.0 of that session. So by the way, shout out to Matt Harmon and producer Colin Brennan for doing a great job. So when you mentioned that you've still got a few drafts to go. Are there any principles that you're looking to employ, or even advising people when they hit you up for advice?
I don't know that I have hard and fast rules. I'll tell you what, I don't have like a shopping list of guys necessarily that I have to go get. I will say, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately because I've had, my last couple drafts I had some good fortune early on where I was getting like, first overall pick, third overall pick. Of late, I've been more like back end of drafts, and it's not. This is a thing when I pop up in your little draft room in your Yahoo draft. I'm there to tell you that drafts aren't totally fair, right? And the back half, historically, the back half of a draft has not quite the same winning odds as the front half of a draft. And so one thing that I like to do. My feeling is that you need to come out of a draft having a clear strength somewhere. And so I've been thinking about this a little bit lately because I've been, sort of stuck in like the 10th spot, 11th spot. I like to make sure if I'm there, I don't mind having a lopsided team. I don't mind going zero RB from that spot. I don't mind if Travis Kelce falls to me. I'm definitely taking Travis Kelce. I don't mind being the guy who takes a quarterback in round 3 to trigger the quarterback run, or round 2 even to trigger the quarterback run, because I want to be able to look at one or two spots on my roster at the end of a draft and say, oh, I'm set. I'm good. I've got Josh Allen, or I've got Jalen Hurts, or Mahomes, whatever. Or I've got Kelsey. Or, man, I started that draft with Steph Diggs and Garrett Wilson. I'm good. Nobody's got receivers like me. That's the way I want it to play out. That may mean, that your running backs are like Damian Pierce and some dude. It might not be perfect. But it's okay to be uncomfortable with your roster at the end of a draft, is what I'm saying, especially if you have just a clear and overwhelming strength at some spot. Like, I think that is really the most important thing.
And you know what? I love that you said that, because so many people feel like they need to like fill the roster with studs, and especially in deeper leagues where you're starting at 3 or 4 flexes and something like that. It's not going to be that way. But so maybe you don't like your RB2, or I have a team that my RB2 is Antonio Gibson, and I like everything else on the team. So I like that you said that, because that's maybe you're able to shore up that spot with a trade or something later on, because I mean, I definitely like that mode of thinking.
The other thing I always like to tell people is that you're going to get a million things wrong, not a million. Okay, fine. But like, you're going to cut a third of your team, and like another third is going to get injured. The single most important thing in this game, and I know you and I are gonna talk a little fantasy baseball later. This isn't fantasy baseball, and like, our predictions are going to be wrong about football, and chaos is like the one thing that you can count on in the NFL. Injuries, more injuries, suspensions, more injuries, right? Like, that's what dominates an NFL season. So you need to get 1 or 2, hopefully 3 things massively right. Like, there's a handful of players each year who are like golden ticket players to take you to the playoffs. It is, it is what like some people would call a strong link game. You are as good as your best player in fantasy football. You are as good as like your 1 or 2 best players. That at some level that makes it easy, right? It's not the grind that fantasy baseball is. You don't have to get a dozen things right. You just got to get a couple things really, really right. And if you get 1 or 2 of those right answers, you're gonna sail through to the postseason. You're gonna have a really good chance to win the league. The devil's in the details. It's hard to get those things right. Like, it was hard to get Cooper Kupp right a couple years ago. It was hard to get Steph Diggs right 3 years ago. But if you did, you won the damn league. So like, that sort of thing is that is the key in fantasy football for sure.
So I got to ask you, being a Chicago guy, could Justin Fields be that skeleton key this year?
Yeah, for sure. There are clear headwinds there. And I will also say, like, it's not, last year Justin Fields was practically free. If he missed, no big deal. You took him in the back half of a draft. Who cares? You're going to cut everybody that you take in the second half of a draft in some leagues. And it's not really a huge deal. This year, it's not like that. This year, he's like your 4th round pick or your 5th round pick, right? So there is a cost. If you take Justin Fields in the range that he's going, it means you are passing on a very good wide receiver or one of those dead zone running backs who maybe something, maybe he's nothing, but there's like a real opportunity cost. So that is a worry. I will say, it's almost not the ceiling that you need to focus on, which is very high, but the floor, I would say, if he just stays healthy, is pretty safe, because a quarterback who can run for 1,100 yards that's cheating, right? That's not, he didn't even play the full season last year, and he finished as the QB6. He had the league's worst receiving core last year. He finished as the QB6. He led the league in time sacked, and he barely even threw a pass, right? Like, he, all sorts of, but those are also negatives, right? Like that, there's a lot that needs to get better. I think DJ Moore fixes a chunk of it. I don't think that DJ Moore is AJ Brown. I don't think he's Steph Diggs. I don't think he's like a top 5 NFL receiver, but I do think he's a top 20 like real life NFL receiver. And the biggest thing that we need to find for Justin Fields, that Bears fans know this, fantasy managers should know this. Like, he needs some layups. He needs just some easy completions. And last year's receiving core did not allow it. At all, right? Like, he had an average depth of target that was like over 9 yards. It was near the top of the league. So on the one hand, you can say, okay, well, he's not throwing the ball a lot, but at least when he does, it's a high yield pass attempt. But like, if you're going to sustain drives, if he's actually going to pass for like 3,400, 3,500, 3,600 yards, he's got to get some layups. And there just were not any layups in this passing game last year. So I think DJ Moore can fix that. I think we can get like 4 or 5 completions a game to DJ Moore that do not travel very far in the air, and they come immediately right out of Justin Fields' hands, right? Like a second, less than a second in processing time. And it's just boom, completion, 8 yards. Let's get into second and short. Like, I think that's what this offense needs. That's what Justin Fields needs. That's the path to him having a pretty good passing season. And if he just gets to like 3,400 yards, something like that as a passer, he gets to 20 passing touchdowns, he's a top 3 fantasy quarterback, because he's like, with the ball in his hands, he's as good as anybody in the game.
No, exactly. I mean, gosh, a couple of those runs last year were just absolutely electric. So I hope he's able to stay healthy, and I hope he, for his sake, that he runs a little bit less, not, maybe just 1,000 yards, but throws for.
I'll tell you his problem as a runner. The thing that concerns me as a runner, he's not like Lamar Jackson is really good at just getting down and getting out of bounds, and a lot of these guys are. And Justin Fields, it's just like, I don't know if it's his own competitive nature. He was like this in college too. Like, he likes to deliver a hit, which is just catastrophic. Like, as a Bears fan watching these games, and Justin Fields doesn't just step out of bounds, but like throws himself into somebody to maybe gain an extra yard. Super painful to watch. It is the kind of thing that if you're running the ball 120 times, it is going to cost you at some point. So there are some things that Justin Fields needs to get the heck out of his game, and that is one of them.
So one of the things that you talked about in that last cram session was the fact that not to focus too much on the end of the season. So you got to get there first, which I think is very valid, because you want to win. You want to win week 1. You don't get there without getting a pretty good start. I do have one thing. Do you look? I mean, when you talked about the elite quarterbacks, did you by any chance peek that Jalen Hurts has the Cardinals at home in week 17? That all three of the big 3 quarterbacks that we talked about are all at home that week. You got Mahomes against Joe Burrow, and then Allen is at home against the Patriots. Does that get into your mind at all?
Yeah. One of the things, the main thing that I was talking about in that cram session was just the idea that, I feel like it goes this way even in some industry drafts. I had a live draft a couple nights ago, and it's all people who like play a lot of fantasy and they work in sports media. And this one guy was like sweating his bye weeks, and like you just can't do that. I get the temptation. I get that you think that when you're drafting your fantasy team, you're just mapping out the whole season and I'm never going to cut anybody, but like, this isn't like real money, and this is not a real team, and you are not under contract with the guys that you are drafting in your freaking fantasy league. Like, you're going to cut a third of them. You can't make long-term plans. That is definitely something. Like, you can go ahead and look at September if you want to, but like, you can't plan for October. You can't plan for November. Again, you're going to cut a bunch of these guys because they're underperforming. You're going to cut others because they're hurt. You just like, don't look ahead to November and be like, oh, I can't draft this guy who I like better because of the bye week that is a huge mistake. You get one shot to just purely assemble as much talent as you possibly can on a team, and that's your draft. And that's what you have to do. And then you can leverage that talent for the rest of the season. You can't map it out like it's like, there's a million things are going to go wrong, and you just can't make plans like that. That said, there are some teams that we're pretty sure are going to be bad. Like, the Cardinals are a pretty good example. Like, I'm not sure the Cardinals aren't actively trying to lose this year, right? Like, there are other teams that are going to fall into that. I guess one of my points there is we never know really who the good defenses are going to be once we get to December. So I would not shy away from people because you're afraid that they face like even the defenses that we think are going to be awesome, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Niners. They're all just one or two injuries away.
So Andy, going into this weekend, it's such an important weekend. We've talked about so many different things, and a couple of different players, and especially love the insight on Justin Fields. Is there any last bit of advice, or maybe a player that you're really high on, or maybe somebody you're fading that you want to mention?
Yeah, I listen. All of this is like the definition of a sleeper is relative to your league, right? The definition of who's a deep name, who's not. This is all relative to your league, so I don't want to like insult anybody there. People get really sensitive when you're like, Marvin Mims is a sleeper. Well, no, he's not. He's a sixth rounder in my league, whatever. I do have, I said earlier, I don't really have a shopping list of players, but I do have a list of players that I am clearly higher on than most. And so I end up with them in a lot of places. And I'll just throw out a handful of names. One of them is Deontay Johnson.
Yes.
He goes crazy late. He's so good. That guy's so good. And we're coming off last season. He didn't score any touchdowns and people are like, oh, he's bad at touchdowning. Well, the guy sees 140 targets a year. He's a super easy separator. That is going to be, there's no way that offense is going to be like last year. Like that's going to be a better offensive environment. It wouldn't shock me if he scored 10 touchdowns this year. He's just a really, really good player. And we've got him buried like in the 30s or something at receiver on some platforms. Like that guy's really good. And you should target him. Like you should think of him as a wide receiver too. You should think of him as basically the same player that he was going into last year. I'm sorry he let you down, but that guy's really good. Damian Pierce is somebody I get a lot of, and he's got a little helium in the draft price. He's really going up, but it's because he never came off the field with CJ Stroud during the preseason. Also, I think people just forgot how good he was because he missed the final month of the season last year, but that guy still finished among the missed tackle leaders. He's great. The flyer that I take, I name dropped Marvin Mims there. I get Mims anywhere I can. I don't have super high expectations for the Denver Broncos generally this year, and I'm a big skeptic on Russ at this stage of his career. But I think Marvin Mims can comfortably lead that team in receiving. I think he's a dark horse candidate to lead all rookies in receiving. He's just got such a runway now with the Judy injury, with the Tim Patrick injury. That guy had like a 40-inch vertical at the combine. He ran a 4.38. He was super productive in college, multiple seasons, averaged about 20 yards per catch for his collegiate career. He's going to be a player. And if Marvin Mims finished with 1,000 yards this year and led the Broncos in receiving, it would be the slightest bit surprising to me.
Would not be surprised at all. And you know what? You mentioned Deontay Johnson. I almost feel like he could qualify as a Raul Ibanez All-Star.
Oh, yeah. It's such a good point. Like, we're so bored of him. He let you down last year. He's not like old yet, but he's been around for a while. And we also all know like some of the issues with him, right? He'll give you the occasional drop. And I was just joking about this with Matt Harmon. Like there's a moment every game where you think that Deontay Johnson is lost for the year, right? Like he goes limping off the field and he has the worst expression on his face, and then he just trots out for the next series. But he always plays. He always sees 140, 145 plus targets. And there's no way that offense isn't better this year. It's too talented.
And so on the baseball side, two things. I mean, we're both big National League only fans, which we definitely bonded over in at the Expo.
Yeah.
What's all? Was it just growing up a Cubs and an NL fan that drew you?
It's honestly it's that I've been in this one league for like. Probably hasn't been 30 years, but it's creeping up on 30 years. It's 20 plus years. Small league, but it doesn't matter if it's a small league when it's NL only. We have 1 million starting spots in that thing, and it's a dynasty league. It's like a little bit of a hybrid dynasty keeper league. I guess it is technically a keeper league, but we keep a lot of guys, right? So you're carrying over like 10 guys a year. So you just like, that's just a great format because you just become like sort of enmeshed with your team. Like I'm thinking about it in the off season. You know, it's just the great thing about dynasty generally is it's the season never ends. You know, you're just connected to these names and these players all the time. And so it's just it happened to be one of the first baseball leagues that I started playing on Yahoo's platform, and it's so easy to get hooked, right? And it also like it helps people know this generally about fantasy. It just makes you a better informed fan, and you know, a big Cubs fan, big National League fan. It's super helpful just to know the entire National League player pool and to, you know, know who's up and coming in the National League as well. It's just super useful.
Yeah, the prospects are big on prospects. Yes, definitely. I love that. And yeah, and you know, you're right. I mean, my league's been around since 1986. I joined it in 1990. And
Yeah.
I mean, these are like brothers to me. And so it's and you know, we all know one another's tendencies. But yeah, it's so great. And I actually kind of feel like it helps to I think it actually helps to kind of like viewing multiple sports. Do you think I feel like it helps to kind of like there are things to look for when watching you know, that watching a game, maybe that some things that are consistent from one sport to the other, whether it be footwork or body mechanics or something like that, things to look for in players, and maybe identifying potentially elite traits later on. Do you feel, how do you feel about, does it help you, does being a baseball fan also kind of help you being a football analyst, as in both ways?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It gives me an appreciation for how relatively simple it is to play fantasy football.
Yes.
and I can't like I really enjoy fantasy baseball, and I am super attached to many of my baseball teams. I have a bunch of dynasty teams. I also I welcome October. Like I am at a point now where I like baseball is, I don't want to call it a grind because it's really fun, but it is work.
Yeah.
And you know this, like you like even if you're not in a league that is a daily transaction thing, and I've tried to really pare down the number of daily transaction baseball leagues I'm in because I've aged out of it. I ain't staying up until like 1:30 in the morning to see who blew a save every night, right? Like those years are behind me. But even in weekly transaction leagues, you gotta stay on top of it in a way that you don't in football, right? Like I'm probably going to be in 30 seasonal football leagues this year, and it's that's so much easier than being in like 5 baseball leagues. Just something about the fact that there's just the games keep coming. There's games every day. The football season has such a rhythm, right? Like you can check in on your football team a couple times a week, and
Yep.
you can dominate the league, and that is just you're not making the playoffs in baseball if you do that, or you're definitely in the second half of the standings if you do that. You just can't, it's daily. And it's not just daily. It's like in the morning, it's before lineups, lock in, and then it's at the end of the day, right? And so once we get to this time where there's the content demands are extreme in football right now, and we're about to start week 1, and like everything's hitting, and it's like the decisive month of the baseball season, it's just this gets tough.
Oh, I hear you. I know last year I won my league in the 7th inning of the last game of the season, my NL only league. And it was a home run. A Cody Bellinger home run was the difference.
Oh my gosh.
And I was so exhausted. I felt I just was done. I had a beer that night. I think I fell asleep at like 8:30. So just absolutely, yeah, no parade that night. But amigo, I'm gonna save the Mexican food talk for another time because I know we're having technical issues. But I so enjoyed this, and again, just so grateful. Any last words, anything you want to plug before we sign off for Labor Day weekend?
Oh man, I just want to thank you for having me. Good luck to everyone in their drafts this year. We've got there's a draft kit that our editors have put together on Yahoo that is everything all in one place. It's a super neat like draft hub. And you mentioned it, like you and I are kind of inside this bubble where like, oh, we've been drafting for months and all the football work is done. But most people are actually just drafting this weekend, right?
Yep.
Like most people are just waking up to the fact that their fantasy draft is about to happen, and they have not been paying attention in June and July, and they did not assemble 60 best ball teams or whatever, and like they're just waking up to it. So it's all in one place at the Yahoo Draft Kit on the Yahoo Fantasy site. So go seek that out, and you will find anything that you need.
No, awesome. And yeah, you'll see Andy's work. You'll see even a few things from me in there. So again, so proud to be a part of the team, and so grateful. And everybody, thank you for joining us. Muchas gracias. And make sure you're following Andy and at Andy Behrens on Twitter. And you make sure you get follow him there, and all the work. Go to the Yahoo Fantasy. If you're still deciding, get the Yahoo Fantasy app, and you'll see our articles pop up on your phone all day long. I get texts all the time on that. Once again, I'm Jorge Martin. Make sure you're following me at Jorge Martin 17. And one last thing, go to underdogfantasy.com and use that promo code Familia 23, get $100 off. Otra vez, to Andy, muchas gracias. Everybody, muchas gracias. Mucha buena suerte in your drafts. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.